Welcome. My name is Kim Palese, and I am so pleased to welcome you on behalf of PPIC's Board of Directors and the Advisory Council for the PPIC Center for Higher Education, or Higher Education Center, which is launching today. Very auspicious day. This event was made possible because of generous support from the Silicon Valley Community Foundation and the Sutton Family Fund. Funding from our sponsors makes programs like today's possible and ensures that they're free and open to the public, both in person and online. I encourage you to learn more about how you can support PPIC by checking out our website or by talking to a PPIC staff member today. And on a personal note, I would like to thank Tom and Marilyn Sutton, who are here today, for their pivotal support for the PPIC Higher Education Center. This would not be possible without you. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items. First, we're always trying to improve our events here at PPIC, so I encourage you to give us feedback, and later today you will be receiving an email with a short survey, and we ask that you please let us know how we can improve our events or any feedback that you have about today's event. And please, silence your cell phone. And now on to the program. Before we get to the conversation with Senator De León and UC President Janet Napolitano, I thank you both for being here today. Welcome. We will first hear from Senior Fellow Hans Johnson, the Director of the PPIC Higher Education Center. Thank you, Hans, and welcome.
Thank you, Kim, and I'm very excited to hear the conversation that follows, as all of you are. I will make my comments brief, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Higher Education Center, and the first thing I'd like to do is to thank some key people. So for today's event, the Sutton Family Fund and the Silicon Valley Community Foundation have provided support. So we appreciate that very much. For some of our initial research at the Higher Education Center, the College Futures Foundation has been supporting that, and so we're very excited about that as well. Establishing a Higher Education Center has been a lot of work, and it's been an exciting process for those of us at PPIC. That includes the PPIC Board of Directors. In deciding and deliberating about establishing a center within PPIC, there are a lot of decisions that have to be made, and I appreciate their efforts. We also have a Higher Education Advisory Council, which has now had a couple meetings. It is a sharp and engaged group of higher education policy experts, and I know they will keep us on our toes here at PPIC as we move forward with our Higher Education Center. The staff that I work with at PPIC is phenomenal. So many gracious people in terms of their time, the examples they set. So we have our water center, which was established a year ago, which provided a great example of where to go. They have solved the drought. They made it rain. Wait till you see what we accomplish in the next year, okay? In addition, our government affairs team, our communications team, our finance team, and of course our research team, and then the president of the Public Policy Institute of California, Mark Baldassare. Mark, I appreciate your support and your encouragement. None of this would have happened without you spearheading this effort, so I appreciate that very much. And then last but certainly not least, Tom and Marilyn Sutton and the Sutton Family Fund. They have provided ideas and engagement to PPIC for a number of years. And the Higher Education Center is the most recent incarnation of their good work and support for PPIC. So to both of you, I thank you very much for this opportunity. We will not let you down. And if we do, it's not my fault. So what is the mission of our new Higher Education Center at PPIC? It is to advance practical solutions that enhance educational opportunities for all Californians, improving lives and expanding opportunities for economic growth across the state. We have an ambitious agenda to match our ambitious mission, and we are going to be focusing, at least initially, on three key areas in higher education. The first one is access. The second one is outcomes. That is outcomes for both students and outcomes for the state. And the third one is finance. I think now is a really exciting time to be working in higher education in California. It's certainly a controversial time. I personally have been working in higher education for quite a number of years now, and I've never seen so much legislative interest and public interest in higher education as I see right now. Partly that's because we face many clear challenges in some of those same areas that we've identified at PPIC as central areas for our work. So let me give you some examples. In terms of access, California ranks 47th in the nation among all states in terms of the share of high school graduates that go directly to a four-year college or university, 47th. We have some challenges in terms of student outcomes. For example, completion rates are low at the community colleges. Less than half of students ever end up earning a certificate, a degree, or transferring. And even at the California State University system, only a little under 60% of students ever end up earning a bachelor's degree. And then finally, in the area of finance, we obviously have huge challenges. Tuition is often at the forefront of a lot of people's thinking in terms of concerns about affordability in higher education. It is at an all-time high. But we have ongoing problems figuring out how we are going to fund our higher education system in the state. Now, despite these challenges, I'm not pessimistic. I'm actually quite optimistic. There's lots of innovation and opportunities for moving forward that's happening right now in California. So, for example, in access, there's an SB 103 working group. I'm looking at you over here, SB 103 working group members, that is looking at eligibility levels for high school students going to the four-year colleges and universities. And when that work is done, I think we're going to have a vigorous debate about what the right share should be. And should California stay at the levels that we established 50 years ago in terms of how many high school graduates should be eligible for UC or CSU? Or are we going to try to update that number for the 21st century and the economy that we have today? I think PPIC is well positioned to play a role in that discussion. In terms of completion, the Student Success Initiative of the community colleges has resulted in a lot of innovation and a lot of new things happening in the community colleges. And at the California State University system, establishing a new graduation initiative that's focusing on getting more students through that system and to graduation is something that we've actually looked at here at PPIC, and we'll have a report coming out in the next few months on their graduation initiative. And again, some innovative and new things going on. And then finally, with respect to finance, California is in a lot better place than we were certainly a few years ago. There is some renewed funding for our higher education. It remains a challenge, but certainly one of the key opportunities here is figuring out how to spend our money, our higher education dollars, as effectively as possible. As I said, I think PPIC is well positioned. We have strong demand for our work. Our evidence-based, policy-focused effort is something that I think is needed, and along with other partners here in California, I think will really make a difference. We know that equity, innovation, collaboration are central to making lasting improvements in higher education in California. And certainly, I think almost every one of us in this room would agree with the statement like higher education is transformative. It's not just a platitude, it's real, it's true. Education and prosperity go hand in hand. The long history of economic progress in California and the United States and throughout the world is strongly tied to improvements in educational attainment. So I'd like to leave you with three key thoughts. First, higher education matters. It matters to individuals and it matters to our state. Secondly, Californians know it, and they are responding. For example, record numbers of students are applying for UC and CSU. And third, California can do more, and we need to do more. So I invite you to keep abreast of PPIC's Higher Education Center. We have a new website. We have the briefing kits, which you have all received. And we work with other partners here in California, many of whom are in this room, to try to improve student outcomes in our higher education systems for the state. And so now I'd like to welcome to the stage President Pro Tem of the California State Senate, Kevin De León, along with the University of California President Janet Napolitano and PPIC President Mark Baldassare for what will be, I'm sure, a very engaging conversation. Thank you to all of you for coming.
Thank you, Hans. Very nice comments, and congratulations on being director of the center. And I like your tie, and I think I see a lot of purple around the room, and apparently Senator De León got the memo on the purple as well. So, what a privilege to be here with these two distinguished leaders of California, and I just want to briefly introduce them, and then we'll get right into the questions about higher education and California's future. Senator De León has been the president pro tem of the Senate since October 2014.
Correct.
And he was first elected to the Senate in 2010. And when he was elected to the Senate in 2010, those of us who do polling know that the approval rating of the legislature at that time was at 14%, and today it stands at 44%. So
there is a correlation with my election.
well, there's a relationship there that I just wanted to point that out. He was originally elected to the legislature in the Assembly in 2006, and has a very distinguished career in the legislature and very active career in public service prior to joining the legislature. And we appreciate your presence here today.
Thank you, Mark.
And President Napolitano became the 20th president of UC in September 2013. And prior to, the University of California doesn't need much of an introduction. The 10 campuses, the 5 medical centers, the 3 national laboratories, and so forth, widely recognized as one of the top public universities in the world. And when President Napolitano joined the University of California, had that position and holds that position today, being one of the top public universities in the world. Prior to her time as the president of UC, she also ran large, complex organizations. Good background for coming to California. The Department of Homeland Security, where you were Secretary of Homeland Security in the Obama administration, and formerly Governor of Arizona, as well as Attorney General in Arizona. So thank you very much. And thank you, the two of you, for the outstanding public service that you do for all of us who are here in California.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hans gave a terrific description of why higher education is important. And I'd like to start our conversation today by hearing from the both of you about what we can do, we as a state can do to ensure that higher education is a top priority in California.
Go, Jen.
Well, I think we do stand at a very important pivot time in California, where we need to be thinking about what it takes to educate the next generation of Californians. What will the California workforce require? And there's some data about that in the reports that were issued today. And whether we are doing all we can as a state with respect to accessibility, with respect to affordability, with respect to outcomes. And I'd like to add another part, which is with respect to excellence. And I think when you said one of the top public universities in the world, Mark, I'd offer a friendly amendment. The University of California is, by all kinds of measures, the top public university system in the world as a research university. What can we do to make sure that Californians continue to have not only access to the university, but that we continue to sustain its excellence?
Thank you.
First and foremost, Mark, thank you very much, and Hans as well, to be here with Janet and this incredible audience to talk about a very important topic. I do agree with Janet. We're at a very crucial point here in the state of California for the following reasons. Number one, we are the 7th largest GDP on planet Earth. There are only 6 other nations on this planet who have larger and more powerful economies than us. We are a nation state, so we are a subnational. If we're going to improve this economy and actually become the 6th or 5th largest GDP, it is actually very critical that we deal with 2 issues as it relates to higher education, but in particular to the UC system, which I agree with Janet. It is the premier UC public university system in the world, bar none. But when we disaggregate the data in California, whether it's Marin County, whether it's San Francisco, the Peninsula, South Bay, large parts of Los Angeles, Orange County, as well as San Diego, it can feel like it's part of the second coming of the Gilded Age. We do have pockets of poverty, no doubt, in the Bay Area, as well as in Los Angeles and San Diego and Orange County. But if we look at the Central Valley and we go down the Central Valley and then we make a left towards the Inland Empire, these parts of the state have not felt the positive economic resurgence of being the 7th largest economy on planet Earth. So when we disaggregate the data, we see really entrenched deep poverty. So the issues of accessibility is absolutely critical. The issues of affordability is very critical for a new economy of tomorrow. It's not just the UC system, but it's also the CSU system. And I believe, biasly, I think the community college system will play a major role in being a major workhorse for the state of California, because the reality is, in the most ideal society in California, the vast majority of California high school graduate students are not going to attend a UC school or even a Cal State school. So that's why I think the community colleges are going to play a major pivotal role for the sustained economic growth, or we're going to go in a very different direction.
Thank you. Senator De León, earlier, well, actually a few days ago, you introduced SB 1050, which intends to improve college readiness so that more high school students will be ready to go to college in California than we currently have. And I wonder if you could, if I could ask the 2 of you, because I know, let me ask President Napolitano first. You've just taken a tour of high schools, and you continue to visit high schools. What are you seeing that's working and not working in terms of getting high school students ready for college? And then maybe we can talk about some of the details of 1050.
Yeah, you're right, Mark. So I've been going to a lot of high schools, and I'll be in Riverside the day after tomorrow visiting a high school. Really not only watching about what's going on from a teaching perspective, what the students are learning, but what are their aspirations? What are they dreaming of? And how do we connect them with the University of California and give them and their families the information they need? Because these students are many, very talented, very smart. Not all high schools in California are created equal. And so when they apply to college, when they come to university, they're not all equally prepared. So we want to make sure that as those students attend the University of California, that we anticipate that and do all that we can to make sure that they meet their aspiration and their aspirations. It is transformational. 42% of the students at the University of California are first-generation college students. In the class of 2020, the freshmen who were just admitted, 37% are coming from underrepresented minority students. So as an engine of social mobility, there really has been none better than the UC so far. I'll give you one more statistic, and then I'll try to stay away from statistics. But the New York Times
We like
last year,
statistics.
data-driven and evidence-based policy, that's where I live. New York Times last year did their own rankings, and their ranking was based on accessibility. 6 of the top 7 schools in the United States were the University of California. The number 1 ranked school was Irvine. The number 7 ranked school was Berkeley. That's a story that doesn't often get told or acknowledged, but we know we can do more. So we've committed to add 5,000 more California students this year, 5,000 more during the next 2 years, 10,000 total over 3 years. They're not all going to come from the same level of preparation. Those students need to be able to meet their aspirations as they enter the University of California, and that's some of the work that we are participating in with the legislature, and it ties into some of the legislation that you've been offering.
Yeah, Mark, just it was last week Friday in the city of San Gabriel, which is in San Gabriel Valley in Southern California, just slightly east of Los Angeles, a largely Asian American community, Latino Asian American, primarily Chinese American population. We announced Senate Bill 1050 that deals with creating a pipeline for students to enter the UC system, a pipeline because our graduation rate in the aggregate in California is roughly about 80%. It's whites, Latinos, African Americans, and Asian Americans. For Asian Americans as well as whites, it's about 93%, Latinos 80%, African Americans 77%. So if African Americans and Latinos improve in their graduation rates, obviously our aggregate number will improve, it'll go higher. But we know that of the 80% of the kids who graduate from high school in California today, roughly about 42% of them are actually AG ready and prepared, have taken the AG courses, which are a minimum baseline admissions requirement to attend the University of California system. Therefore, that means roughly 38% of California high school students either don't have access to A through G course, there are not enough of them on their campus, or they don't exist altogether. We're talking about 4 years of English, we're talking about math, we're talking about 2 years of lab science, we're talking about 2 years of a foreign language, visual arts class, as well as an extracurricular class, the A through G. Now, if I apply and I come from a very poor neighborhood, at no fault of my own, if I can't get all my A through G class requirements, then I won't be eligible for entrance, admissions to a school of my choice at the UC level. Not fault of my own, but that means someone from Menlo Park or from Sausalito or Palo Alto or Pacific Palisades or Santa Monica or La Jolla, Mission Hills is going to jump to the top of the line because that's the way the system works. And then you add a weighted formula system, which are the AP classes. And I know that there's one, and I credit them very much so, down in Orange County, Huntington Beach High School District has on one high school campus, they offer 30 advanced placement courses. So how are you going to compete if you live in the Mission District or East Oakland or East San Jose or East Palo Alto or East LA with a high school that offers you the whole array of A through G as well as A P classes? You're not going to be able to compete. And the reality is that drives and compounds the inequities that we have in the state of California. So what we want to do with 1050 is we want to provide the resources between $100 and $200 million. We'll take it from Prop 98. We'll invest that in our high schools. And what we'll do is if you're not A through G ready, if you need more counseling, dates, requirements that are required by you all at the UC level, if it's fee entrance, not entrance, but fee examination waivers for the AP, because they can't even afford to pay for the AP class or course, I should say, we're going to provide those resources. On top of that, we want to provide the UC additional slots, because if we are successful in getting these young men and women to apply and successfully at getting them admitted, well, we need more enrollment slots, and we need to buy those slots because there's a cost figure for each slot. So we believe that we can expand the slots, get young men and women, irrespective of their ethnicity. We live in a 209, era today, but whether you're Asian American, Latino, African American, poor white, and you're at a lower decile, the lowest economic strata, we want to make sure we give you a real opportunity to succeed and enter a UC and hopefully a UC of your choice.
Well, and not only that, for us, it's about not just admission, but graduation, and the ability to graduate in a field that you have a passion in, or again, I use the word aspiration in. So the extra help, not remedial. We're not set up in that way, but what we can do even more of is provide more support for students who may be coming from lesser prepared high school educations, so that they are competitive, they're enjoying their UC experience, and it's really becoming that transformational engine that we've known it to be in the past. So it all marries up together.
I think so. And I know there's always been this dynamic that predates, President Napolitano with regards to UC admissions officers. Well, it's not our responsibility to get them prepared. It's the K through 12. Therefore, it's the high school's responsibility to get them prepared for admissions-ready entrance to the UC. I think the K through 12, as well as our higher education institutions, need to work in concert with each other. They need to talk with each other. And I think that the UC president, as well as the chancellor of CSU, as well as the chancellor of community colleges, I think a few years ago, I don't know when it was, it may predate you, but they did something that was very innovative and quite brilliant. They, for the very first time, started speaking to each other. Yeah, and this sort of kind of like this siloed approach towards higher education and this sort of territorialism, was very pronounced in the culture, I believe. It's just my own opinion, in higher education. And they have since really broken it down, broken the silos. And I think that's a credit to leadership at the UC as well as the other higher education institutions.
Well, thank you. And if I might, let me just pause for a moment on community colleges, because as you mentioned, Kevin, it is a portal of entry to higher ed for so many California students. And California is unique in this regard, to have so many community colleges spread throughout the state. One of the things we've done is to create, and the faculty of our university deserve the credit. They created 21 transfer pathways. What's a transfer pathway? It is an agreed upon curriculum that if you take these classes during community college, and you are accepted to the UC, all of those classes, all those credits transfer to that major at any of the 9 undergraduate campuses. So you don't have to figure out and go through this really complicated Rube Goldberg thing about, I want to be a molecular biology major, what do I need to take? Now this is the curriculum. You take it at community college, you have to get a certain GPA, and establish your eligibility, but then you really transfer in as a junior. So we anticipate right now about 28% of our undergraduates came to us via community college. We're working to having a full third come via that portal of entry as well.
It's exciting.
Sounds very promising. Sounds like a lot of areas of overlap and agreement in your work on SB 1050 and the work that you're doing to, once students come in, to make sure that they graduate. Well, while Senator De León was busy introducing a new bill, I noticed President Napolitano, you had an op-ed in the Mercury News on Sunday about the tough decisions that had to be made during the very severe budget cuts that took place, and what implications they had for students and for the future of UC. And this was part of the response that you've had to a state auditor's report that came out. And I wanted to ask Senator De León first and then hear from you. What do you make of the state auditor's report on UC admissions?
The audit, or the findings from the audit that were released sometime last week were not very surprising to me. They were not surprising because we just left the worst economic recession since 1929. So we know that collectively, as a legislative body, in a bipartisan fashion, we made some very draconian cuts that were very deep and that were very painful. So as a result, the actual findings were not shocking or surprising to me. Maybe they were to other legislators. But when you make deep cuts and when you shortchange California students in particular, these are the ramifications. These are the consequences. So I am not going to politicize, if you will, the findings. It's clear that we as a legislative body, the executive branch as well, needs to make a determination collectively if we're going to reinvest resources in higher education, particularly backfill as much as we can possibly with all the other choices that we need to make impacting society as a whole. So the findings were not shocking or surprising. I expected that. I know that if they're going to balance the books, as opposed to them making deeper cuts, they're going to try to find other folks that are going to pay full freight. These are out-of-state students. Those out-of-state students, whether you're from New York, Texas, or elsewhere, especially if their UC eligibility was perhaps sub, the California student, I would just say that they're very lucky that they got this stage, to be admitted to the best university system in the world. But I think we're going to change that. We need to invest more in higher education, no question about it.
I'm going to write that down. And hey, listen, I don't think
It's being taped, so
Yeah, no,
you don't have to write.
This was an audit report that basically concluded that decisions made years ago were designed to disadvantage California students, which is a very, to me, wrong conclusion to draw. And I think Senator De León has it just right. You have to harken back to the years 9, 10. A third of the budget cut in an 11-month period. If you're running a business and you have a third of your budget cut in an 11-month period, you have to make some really tough decisions. The UC, it could have cut in-state enrollment and just said, you know what, we won't take the top 12.5%, we'll cut it back to 8% of California students. Could have raised tuition even more, another, say, $2,000, $2,500 a year. Or for UC, you can bring in more out-of-state and international students. We always have had some, and it's important to have that kind of diversity too. Our students will graduate into a globalized world. They need to become used to dealing with people who are from other areas of the country and of the globe. But nonetheless, take the full freight, as you said. The decision made was that option, the wisest of the three available choices. Allowed the university to keep tuition flat, which it has been since 2010, allowed the university to maintain enrollment of the top 12.5% of California students and otherwise meet its obligations under the master plan. CSU, by contrast, did not have that kind of option because most of the CSU campuses don't really have an out-of-state or international marketability, if you can use that word. And so they cut in-state enrollment. And I think Chancellor Tim White said recently it was by tens of thousands of students. Eligible students were not able to go to CSU. So if the overall product of the audit is for all of us in the state of California, and particularly in the legislature and the executive branch, take a step back and say, you know what? Those decisions were made. They had to be made. You have to make the best of a bad situation. Now, what do we do together moving forward? And what is our collective vision for higher education in our state?
Thank you. So, in a lot of ways, it comes down to how much money the state wants to spend on higher education. I watched with interest the discussions around the Cal State faculty salaries, of which independent bodies said, they're not getting paid enough. They need to be paid more. There was a decision made around that recently. Is the state providing adequate resources for higher education? And if not, why not?
I mean, that's a very good question. I don't know the details of the proposed negotiated settlement between CFA as well as Tim White and CSU. I'm not going to comment until I get the full details of the settlement. I do agree that faculty members do deserve what is just and what is fair. Are we making the right investments or enough investments in higher education is a very good question. You know, as a legislator, you know, as a president of the Senate, I have the responsibility to make decisions as the chief negotiator in the budget representing the Senate vis-a-vis the governor and my counterpart, the speaker, Anthony Rendon. But we also deal with the issue of K through 12. We deal with the issues of corrections, whether your opinions may be on that issue, parks and open space. We deal with early childhood education. This is a $150 billion plus, you know, budget. I do believe we should make more investments in higher education, but it's a question of priorities and the collective priorities of the members of both the Senate as well as the Assembly, and obviously the thoughts and opinions of the governor. This, to me, it's not just about money that's on the table, that's in existence. It's about, for those who are here and understand the way our tax system works in California, it's rather antiquated. It's heavily dependent on high wage earners in California. And that's why we have a roller coaster, very volatile tax system. When it rains, it pours with money, and it's fantastic. We have enough resources on the table to make incredible investments. How ongoing and sustainable they are is contingent on factors that are beyond our control because we live in a globalized market. So when there is a drought, there is a drought, and hence the very severe pain, economic pain that people feel due to the budget cuts, who are, quite frankly, the most vulnerable. And we're coming off the worst economic recession since 1929. California obviously was disproportionately impacted because of the housing crisis and the subprime loans. And I do think it's a crime today that there's not one single individual that the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. has gone after. But we've had a lot of folks devastated. We've seen suicides, we've seen divorces, we've seen breakups in families, dysfunctions, alcoholism, drug addictions, a lot of this stuff due to the Great Recession of 1929, the lack of investments that we made. And yet to this day, there's no one who has been criminally charged or dealt with in a very just manner. Why do I say this? Because there's a direct correlation with regards to the budgets and the money flow that we get for our general fund based on what one would say fairly a very antiquated tax system. We're going to have to address that if we can rely on a free flow, consistent, stable amount of resources. Therefore, we as legislators and policymakers can get feedback from experts and those who need resources. We can make decisions that are strategic, not immediate triage, trauma care decision making, but rather 5 years, 10 years from now. What kind of society do we want to live in? Who do we want to be admitted to the UC system? And I come back just lastly, the UC system as well as higher education as a whole has to be reflective of the incredible mosaic, the beautiful diversity that is the state of California. There is no more diverse state on planet Earth than in California. You can't go to China and see that diversity because there's Chinese folks there. You can't go to Mexico because everyone's Mexican by far and large. You go to other countries, the diversity is unlike any other place in the world, but it has to be reflective, the faces of Californians, and therefore we have to really start and dig in deep at high school level. It's not just an issue of the admissions process, but can we get these kids UC eligible, prepared and ready, but especially because we live in a post-2009 era, especially in the areas of highest poverty because of the major demographic changes in California. Whether people like this or not, or they view it through a prism of color and the hue of your skin or your legal status, I'm going to ask folks to put that to the side because you don't want to cut your nose to spite yourself because the economic security of this state is in question if we do not educate and give accessibility and affordability to these young men and women.
It's, setting priorities in a budget, it's really hard. The demands are incessant. And I really empathize with the legislature and the governor in terms of everybody's coming in, they want more money. There's only so much. But by way of 35 years ago, 25% of the state general fund went to higher education in California. Now it's less than 10. So I think, that kind of gives you a sense of the reprioritization that's occurred, and now we're feeling the impacts of that. Just as this new, more diverse, aspirational group of Californians is coming of age. That's why I think we need a deeper look about what is it that we're doing in higher education, and how do we continue to marry up what we have fiscally with what we need to do and what the demands on us are. But I'll tell you one thing, and after President Obama was reelected, and we were speaking about whether I wanted to stay on for the second term, I said, well, first of all, being the DHS secretary, that's a tough job. You are 24/7 time in the barrel. And I thought it needed fresh eyes, fresh energy. And then it got me thinking about where did I think I could go or do where I thought I could have an impact on the next stage of my career. And I thought, first of all, I wanted to move back west. 5 years in D.C. was plenty. And then and this is, particularly given my experience as governor, where I had seen the greatest impact in measurable time and metrics on things you could see, not just with the students, but surrounding economies and environment for job creation and everything. It was higher education. And I really thought to myself, boy, wouldn't it'd be nice to run a little, public college somewhere out in the West.
Maricopa Community College.
Yeah, Maricopa Community College. I'm there. And although that's the second largest community college in the United States. But in any event, literally 2 weeks later, I got a call from a headhunter about this position at the University of California. Because I do think, in terms of what we can do in public to be a game changer in people's lives, and also the surrounding community, because every place you see our campuses, and you should go to Merced and see what's happening in the Merced area now that we have a UC campus established there. It's a game changer for the economy as well.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous. So you two both have experience in leadership as well as elected office. You've got political instincts as well as the knowledge base for this question. And I think it's an important one. When we think about the college skills gap here at PPIC being, we're going to be 1.1 million short by 2030. That's going to require resources, certainly, to address that and to create more college graduates. It's going to mean having the right tools to work with, and it's also going to mean having the political will. And from your vantage point, do we have that combination here in California to make real progress?
I think we do. Listen, we've
and
done,
why
yeah.
do you think
There's
that?
a reason why. And I've said this openly. I said this very publicly. I've said this to New York Times, elsewhere. I don't think there is a greater legislative body in the country, bar none, than the California State Legislature. The progressive policies that we have moved in the past few years are unmatched than any legislative body, including Washington, D.C., the House of Representatives, and the U.S. Senate. I mean, we have the most far...
No, that bar's low.
That bar is very low, yeah. But, that being said, even if the bar is very low, even when there was Democratic majorities, I mean, we have moved, even when they had Democratic majorities, there's no other state, no other country that has moved the most progressive, far-reaching policies on climate change than the state of California. Wage theft than the state of California. The issue of equal pay for women who are doing the same work, who demand respect and the same pay as their male counterparts. California. Just recently, and although there may be diversity of opinion in this room, the largest minimum wage increase in the history of the United States of America. That is the state of California. We are the leaders nationwide, and in some instances globally. Washington, D.C. looks towards California. We look very minimally towards Washington, D.C. for any type of leadership, period, irrespective of who's in charge. So the point I want to make, to your point, Mark, is the political will there? Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. The leaders of higher education, Janet and Tim and I don't know the fellow, whoever's the chancellor of the community college system is, but working in concert with the legislature and with the executive branch, we can work together, make the right investments. There's no doubt that we can change the paradigm, I believe, and it's less about prisons, because that's sucked up a lot of our general fund dollars. This craziness of all the enhancements and the craziness of this prison industrial complex of building and building and building, and the old adage, if you build it, they shall come. Well, they came, when we added all these enhancements and the major shift from investments in human capital, which are our children here in California, something went really wrong. And this happened predates the recession and before I got to the legislature. But it's about investing in human capital. And I believe the political will and the leadership is present. We've already demonstrated a whole variety of proposals that I just itemize. Why not do it for our children here in California?
And I was listening to Kevin when you were going through the really remarkable achievements. The Senate of the California legislature has been a particularly effective body, I think, in terms of turning ideas that you talk about in a think tank, wouldn't that be nice, into pieces of legislation and negotiating them to bills that can be signed and furthered. And California has a lot of challenges as a state, and it's not an easy state to govern. You could pick anyone to say, this is going to be it. We're going to focus on this. This will be the top priority, or one of the top three, et cetera. I think the political challenge, if I might say, for higher education is that it quickly gets lost in K-12. It quickly gets lost in pre-K. It quickly gets lost in healthcare. I mean, there are all kinds of other things that have compelling stories. I think our challenge as leaders in higher education and as families and as students and as others, as citizens of California, is to say, all of those things are worthy and important. But if California is to retain its identity, not only as the nation's largest and most diverse state, but in the end, its most sustainably innovative, economically diverse state, it needs not only a more highly educated populace, but it also needs the knowledge creation that goes along at research universities that have fueled the biotech industry, the medical device industry, the wine industry, and the list could go on and on, which is another part of higher ed in our state at the UC level, which is it's the education, the higher education of these students, and then letting them turn on their innovation juices.
No, I agree 100%.
So let me...
about what you said about the Senate.
Yeah, about the Senate, right. Yeah.
No, about everything else.
That one we're going to write down, right, yeah. Let me come back to this question because, and dig a little deeper with the two of you, because I think this is really a critical part of the question. You both raised the issue of diversity and increasing diversity of college graduates. I mean, what we're talking about, the challenge ahead is greatly increasing the numbers of college graduates in groups that are underrepresented today. And that's where the issue of having the right tools comes in, the political will, and the resources. And you're seeking to address it in 1050. You're seeking to address it in some of the programs that are being set up and the thinking through. But for me, that's really the key question here. If we're going to have college graduates that look like the face of California, that's a kind of political will and tools. And we're doing this in a world where Prop 209 has said there are certain things we can't do. So anything you want to add to this, just in terms of why you feel a sense of certainty that we're going to get there?
Well, yes, I understand the political challenge. I understand the legal challenge. I understand the potential litigation that would ensue if someone attempted to move forward an affirmative action program. We know what the law of the land is, whether you agree with it or not, with regards to Proposition 209. We know what 209 has also done, especially with regards to African-American admissions to the UC system. We have to think policy-wise. Is this good for the state of California or not? We know what the law of the land is. What can we do to diversify the University of California system by expanding the pool, which is very important to understand. Not shrinking the pool, but actually by expanding the pool and making sure we create an organic pipeline, particularly in the lowest income neighborhoods. It means poor whites, poor Asian Americans, poor Latinos, poor African Americans. How can we do this? And this is absolutely important for us as a state. Listen, I have an affinity for the University of California. I'm not a graduate from the UC system, but I was a beneficiary. I've been very open and public about it. Affirmative action. If it was not for affirmative action, I would not have been admitted to the University of California at Santa Barbara. I didn't have the skill set. I didn't know how to manage my time. Being the youngest child of a single immigrant mother with a third grade education, I was the youngest one, the only one to graduate from high school. I had the moxie. I think I was somewhat smart, but I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to take copious notes. Long story short, I got kicked out of school at UC Santa Barbara. And but I am proof positive that you can still make it and do something with yourself. You know?
I was going to say, yeah, you've done all right.
And my story is not unique. I just want to underscore that. My story is not unique. I'm not an original. There are stories like mine, of my own peers at my age, and there's stories of folks, young men and women today just like me. But if they don't have the tools in high school, they won't be ready for UC admissions. And that's why through 1050, we want to create if you're at a high school, the odds are already against you that you won't be admitted to the UC through no fault of your own, just because the high school will not offer you the courses that you need. And then if you live in Brentwood, or if you live in Santa Monica or Palo Alto, because you can take the AP courses that adds the weighted system that shoots you up the vertical chain, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's not that you are academically, and perhaps academically, on paper, you're smarter, but it doesn't mean that if we don't take a chance on these kids here, that they won't grow over a course of time and be productive citizens of the state of California. The way we have our system set up, is very arbitrary. It's highly subjective, and it's clear to me when you see admissions, it's understandable. It's socioeconomic strata. It's based on if you are born in the right zip code, and I don't believe that a just society should be that way. But it's also incumbent on us as legislators to make sure that we do our job to make sure that the kids at the lowest economic strata have an opportunity to succeed by providing them the tools necessary so that when they do apply, obviously they're UC eligible and UC ready.
I think the challenge, one of the challenges is how can the UC be an elite education and research institution without being elitist? And it's really that's kind of the balance. How do you maintain the research and academic excellence and make sure that the doors are open and the university is accessible and that as we draw more students from throughout the state of California, and as I mentioned, 42% of our current undergraduates are first generation, and 37% of the admitted class of 2020 are underrepresented minorities. But as we draw more and more in, how do we make sure that they succeed? And so, I think one of the things working with your bill, 1050, it helps provide us as well with the tools and the incentive to make sure that we are doing all that we can to provide this kind of elite education for all Californians.
Mark, if I can add something, you asked, do we have the political will? I think we demonstrated it last year. A very unknown fact that unfortunately was not really covered. I know it's not a sexy issue for the press, but in 2015, the CSU system opened up 10,500 brand new enrollment slots. And that was a result of some very difficult negotiations. To the credit to the Assembly and the Senate, we were able to work out a deal. It wasn't a major tax enhancement. We didn't take from Peter to pay from Paul. We repurposed dollars, and we made it a priority to open up 10,500 brand new enrollment slots that otherwise did not exist at the CSU level. That is a demonstrable, verifiable, quantifiable political action that we took that had a positive outcome for the CSU system. I think we can do so now with the UC system. And Janet, we've gotten to know each other, the past year and a half, very unique, selection, very unorthodox, selection to be UC president. I know that when she was first announced, not knowing her, knowing her bona fides as a Homeland Security Secretary, I had my reservations and my concerns. There's no question about it. But I think because of her political leadership, she has been able to navigate the complexities of being at the helm of the UC system, where it's the vertical sort of ascension, if you will, was always some dean or provost or chancellor, some UC school, and they've gone up the ranks, and they don't have the same political skill set or talent, as Janet. So I commend her selection as being at the helm of the greatest public university system in the world. It's not Maricopa Community College system.
Right, right. And that's what you've learned in the last couple of years. And let me just ask President Napolitano, since we last spoke, which was 2 years ago, 6 months into the job.
My rookie season, yeah.
What have you learned about working with the legislature, about the system?
California is unique in many ways. All states have their own way of doing things, their own experiences. I think what differentiates for me for California, where higher ed is concerned, is that because it's had these great systems for so long, the community colleges and CSU and UC, it's had the master plan for 50 years, it almost has gotten, in a way, taken for granted. It will always be thus. And as we know, higher education across the United States is being pulled in all kinds of different directions. And so I think reinvigorating within California, within its political leadership, but within its citizenry, what a special asset it has and how quickly we can lose that asset if we don't take some action now. I think that would be my message for today and a chief lesson learned.
Thank you. Well, if I don't ask some questions now from the audience, people are going to be upset with me. So I have one more question for the two of you, and thank you very much for your comments. So can I take a question from this side of the room or that side of the room, or how about right back here, because I know that there's a microphone right there.
Oh, can I stand? Okay. Hi, thank you both so very much for being here and talking about this important issue. From what I'm hearing, it seems like we would have agreement that we need more revenue in California, and specifically more reliable revenue in California. And it was also mentioned that as California goes, so goes the nation on so many policies here. One policy that the rest of the country has not followed us on is our property tax policy, specifically Prop 13. So it's been 38 years since we passed Prop 13. It's had some unintended consequences. Do either of you support a split roll reform of Prop 13 that would exempt commercial property owners from the protections?
I'll start. Okay, I'll start. Well, as you know, Prop 13 is the third rail of California politics. But your reference, obviously, you're not referencing to personal, residential property, but rather, commercial property and the split roll issue and the inherent unfairness, if you will, of being a multi-billion-dollar, multi-state corporation anchored and rooted in the state of California, and you're paying property taxes that are pre-78 as opposed to what the current value is, and therefore all the revenue that we as a state are losing because they're not adjusted until real time value. I am very open to having a very serious discussion on this issue. That includes commercial property owners as well too, because I do understand too, we have leaders out there or candidates out there who make very big pronouncements and they can't figure out how they're going to make it, but it rallies people and makes them feel good. I'm into always finding a common sense approach, finding common ground. I think I've done that by closing an egregious corporate tax loophole, which is a split roll tax. I won't bore anyone here with the complexities of how that works in California, but we should have a discussion. The answer is yes.
Okay, so I think that's probably in this case one answer is good enough. So this would be Ted Deansfry. Is that right? Yeah.
It's been an interesting discussion. Has anybody looked at how many people are educated outside of the state and come in, and how many people are educated in the state and move out?
Say again,
How many
what was the last
people
question?
have been
How many people are educated at great universities outside of the state
And come in.
California? How many people are educated at our great universities and move out?
Anybody want to address that question?
Kind of depends on whether you're talking a little bit about undergrads and graduate students, but I will say, by and large, the students who come for their education at the University of California will remain in California. They will be taxpayers of California. They will be voters and leaders in California.
Okay, very
And then
good.
can I just add one thing too, just add a quick commentary. Because of the lack of leadership in Washington, D.C. On the issue of immigration, we have a lot of students who come from all over the world, China, Korea, Mexico, and elsewhere. We educate them here, the best, finest public university system in the world, and then they can't stay. They have to return back to California, or they start up their own startup companies and they start competing with us as Californians. That's a lack of leadership in Washington, D.C. that's actually hurting the state of California.
Thank you. I saw a hand come up over here. Trying to take as many questions as possible.
Hi, I have a question. We keep often concentrating on the student and the preparation of the student, and although that's very important, most of them do complete remediation and continue on to their degree. And enrollment rates have been growing, particularly for Latino students and students of color. But there is something that happens once they're in the institution. The way we do things within community colleges and universities, that it's a barrier. Often we think about adding resources and adding programs, but then they don't go to the programs. So what is happening, in terms of hiring also, the type of faculty we have is very much white men, much more women now. But there's something about the institution itself that needs transformation given the demographics and given the changes.
President Napolitano,
Yeah,
how are our institutions
I'm so eager. I'm so
changing?
glad you asked that question, because as a line that I first heard from the provost at Berkeley and has stayed in my mind is, it's not just about graduation, it's about aspiration. And we have students of color, women students, who start off and they want to be a scientist or an engineer, And all of a sudden, you hit those first tough math classes or chem or what have you, and it's a hurdle. And instead of having the ability to go over the hurdle, it's very easy to find a way to go around the hurdle. And all of a sudden, you're, okay, I was a poli-sci major. You're a poli-sci major or something else. And so it's that, let's figure out how to go over the hurdle, not just circumvent it. So you're not only graduating, and our graduation rates, particularly at the 6-year level, are 85, 86, 87%. I mean, they're among the highest of, if not the highest of the public research universities of our type, right? And so it's not just about graduation, it's about the aspiration. I think one of the things that we have been working on as the center has been developing the language for 1050 is what happens when, with this larger catchment area, what happens when those students come to university so that they meet their aspirations. And there's all kinds of different things. It's not just about a program or what have you. It's also about making sure that they know what's available, that they have a cohort, that they don't feel like they're alone in this journey, particularly first-generation college students. Nobody in their family's gone to college before. That you have that kind of consistent, persistent tutoring and whatever else is necessary so that that young person can go over the hurdle, not around it all the time. So it's graduation and it's aspiration. That's our challenge.
There's a question right here. Yes, you.
Thank you so much. This has been a phenomenal conversation. And I'd love to know, I love this issue in terms of closing the achievement gap. And nowhere is that gap larger than with men of color, both at the elementary and secondary level, and certainly in higher education. Can each of you speak to what your understanding of that achievement gap is about and how, because we will never close that achievement gap if we don't begin to address what's going on with young men of color, especially African American, Latino males, but certainly poor white men as well as Asian Pacific Islander men. So I'd love to get your opinions.
Terrific question.
Oh my God, that's a really huge question. Not a huge question, but we can be here for a whole session. Just obviously, it's poverty, it is racism, it's both institutional, covert, and overt. It is low expectations from other folks who have low expectations of men of color. It is men of color ourselves who have very low expectations of ourselves for a whole variety of reasons. It's systemic and it's endemic, and it hurts us economically. It is a justice system that has decided to put enhancement on top of enhancement on top of enhancement and have a pipeline, as opposed to higher education, have a pipeline, to the prison system. And I want to create a California that a young man, a young woman, irrespective of the hue of their skin, can aspire to go on to higher education if that's their choice. If that's their choice. At least they make the choice, as opposed to society dictating to them, well, you can't be a coder because you weren't admitted to college and you didn't graduate from high school, so you haven't met the most basic prerequisites. Oftentimes, as people of color, we have low self-esteem. We have low standards ourselves. I can tell you one thing, when I attended the UC system, I was very intimidated. Because there's no one who looked like me. Funny story, I go to UC Santa Barbara, my mother takes me, my mother's a housekeeper all her life, and she took care of the very wealthy, in the wealthy enclaves in La Jolla. When we got there, she made a remark in Spanish that, why are all the kids just wearing no shoes and just t-shirts and shorts? And she said, pobrecitos, the poor kids, I said, no, Mom, they grew up in BMWs and Mercedes. They're very wealthy, believe me. They have the luxury to dress this way, and those are realities of our life. As a person of color, as the leader of the Senate, Trust me. Well, I'll tell you one thing. When I became a senior associate at the National Education Association, and when I went to Washington, D.C., I dealt with a lot of folks who were summa cum laude from Yale and Harvard and Georgetown, MIT, and Brown. And, you feel it and you sense it. I'm better than you are, And they don't say it directly. And it's not overt. It's covert and it's subtle. And these are issues that even if you graduate from a UC or Yale or Harvard, even if you're an elected official, even if you're president of the Senate, you're always dealing with different types of issues. They're just different. It's more overt. It's more raw at the community level because of the human consequences that where you end up in prison or you end up in a place where you can make decisions for yourself for a good life. Yeah. That's a big question too that we could speak in a long time.
Yeah.
All I'll say is complex societies have complex issues. And some of them are overt, some of them are implicit. We are riven with them. We actually, ironically, have something going on at UC. We call it Achieve UC. And I don't know how the name was selected, but in a way, it is a whole umbrella of programs that are designed to make sure that everybody has an equal chance to succeed once they're admitted.
Mark, can I just add just one thing?
Please do.
And part of 1050 also too is moving policy with purpose, moving policy with intentionality. Because if you let the market forces correct whatever inequities bother you, the market forces on the natural will never take care of the inequities that exist. Unless you move with a sense of purpose and intentionality, policy with very clear expected outcomes, and whether you go around it, under it, whether you send signals to the market, this is where we want you to invest, because overall, whether you believe in a society that every child, irrespective of who they are and where they come from, should have an opportunity to succeed, or if you're self-interested and you believe that we've really got to take care of these kids because my economic, bottom line may be impacted in some form, way, or shape. Whatever it is your motivation, I know what mine are at a very personal level. Irrespective of what my politics are. But it is incumbent on us because the growing demographics and the changes. If we want to be better than the 7th largest GDP, which is quite a position to be in as a nation state, as a subnational, we have to make sure that we educate all of our students, all of our children, but in particular the poorest students of California.
So what I've heard from both of you today is a lot of passion and commitment around the issue of making sure that all young people in California have an opportunity for a college education, and that's very important for us to hear from two leaders in your position. Just want to give you one last chance if there's anything you want to say in terms of, how we reach that goal.
Well, I'll amend your statement in a way because
Second Amendment, right?
Second Amendment.
No, not that Second Amendment.
Okay.
All right, but because I don't want to leave the audience confused. I mean, the University of California was designed and set up to take the top 12.5% of California students and provide them a world-class education and a research environment that will open doors to them in very different ways. We take a third of those students. We will be taking close to a third from community college. The rest are true freshmen. We want to make sure that our catchment, that we are reaching out broadly across the diversity of California to find those top 12.5% students, to make sure they know that the doors are open to them, we want them, and to have the resources we need to make sure they can meet their aspirations once they enroll at the University of California. That is the kind of the tier of things that I'm talking about.
And I understand that that's the mission of the University of California. But what I heard from both of you was a sense of the broader,
I think
the broader goals that we have.
Fair enough.
for society.
Fair enough. And I think we share those goals. I think we've got to take some concrete steps.
Right.
I believe that some of the things that we're doing as a product of our budget agreement with the legislature and the governor last year are helping move us in a positive direction. The transfer pathways, for example, was a project that started even before that debate. I think bills like 1050 can only help us achieve that mission. So we have to take these broad announcements or pronouncements and translate them into legislation. And then we need great leaders in the Senate and the Assembly to get them passed.
Anything you want to close with?
I think that we have very good, strong political leadership in both the Assembly as well as the Senate. I think that we know what we want to do, what we want to accomplish. I think it's going to be part leadership. It comes with a commitment to the resources. It's always about resources. If you have finite amount of resources, but the demands on you are humongous, we're going to have to make certain decisions. Some of them may be very difficult, but I think this is doable. I think it's doable because for the mid to long-term economic forecasting for California, it's absolutely imperative that we open up slots for California students at the UC schools. But again, let me just underscore again, the CSU as well as the community colleges. Community college, you can become a registered nurse at RN at selected community colleges. You don't need a four-year university. Why not become a coder, at a community college? Why do we have to spend 4 years in going through all the admissions apparatus? We have to really think for the future. Commitment, intentionality, resources, leadership. I think we can accomplish great things in California once again.
Terrific. Let's give a big hand of applause.